Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Kim Barrett Show. I am your host, Kim Barrett, and today we are joined by Jason Schappert. If you've ever wanted to grow your business, maybe to the point where you can sell it, this is the episode for you. We dive deep into how he grew his first company across the last 16 years, what his new company looks like, and a lot of business lessons along the way. Of course, if we can ever help you grow your business, head over to our free Facebook community, www.joinmygroup.com.au. But until then, let's jump into the show. Jason, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate you making the time.
Really excited to be here, Kim. Talk all things business, marketing, everything else in between.
It's great to have you. Now, I always like to start off with the same question every time, which is, if I met you at a party and we were just chatting and I said to you, Jason, what is it that you actually do? What's your go-to answer?
Well, my go-to answer, I try not to be too interesting off the bat. I'll say something boring like I'm in finance or I'm in banking. And I mean, if I like you, I'll tell you more, but if I don't want to have a whole conversation, oh, that's the weird finance guy.
Yeah.
Right? So in our last business, we're actually in aviation. So talk about a conversation starter. I would say, oh, I'm in aviation. And everybody always ears kind of perk up from that way. I never got into the fact, I'm a CEO, I'm a founder, I'm all these things. I would always kind of give a generic response and see where the conversation goes from there.
Yeah, I like it. And so tell me a little bit more about that, the aviation side. I'm curious.
Wow. Yeah. So my wife and I, we did it together. Over 16 years, we bootstrapped one of the largest providers of FAA test preparation. So in the States, learning to fly, we produce the books, the videos, the curriculum, everything to really help pilots from zero all the way up to they want to be an airline pilot one day or a military aviator. We produce all that curriculum. So everyone's heard the phrase, you get rich in a niche. Like, talk about a very obscure niche. There's only about 600,000 pilots in the United States. So very, very small niche of whom we were really going after.
So were you a pilot, or was your wife a pilot, or what got you interested in? Because as you say, it's good to choose a niche, but you got to have a little bit of experience in a niche sometimes, surely.
Yeah. No, you're right. Great question. So my dream was I wanted to be a military aviator. So I'm going through flight school. I'm doing all these things. My first flight lesson was at 12 years old. I soloed at 16, so I had a very early start in aviation. And on top of that, I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. My mom and dad still to this day work together with a pest control business of all things. So I grew up killing bugs with dad. That was normal to me, right? Just running a small family business. And I'll never forget when I became a flight instructor and I went into the office of the flight school owner and he said, Jason, we are so excited to hire you. We're going to pay you $11 an hour. And I thought, wait a second. I've been paying you $25 an hour for the past 4 years doing this. And I just realized you only pay those guys 11. I'm on the wrong side of this deal. Right. So I went back, talked to my dad. He said, this is how business works, son. Right. Let's get going this way. And that's really what kind of led me into it. I was too tall to be a military aviator. I didn't want to work for the airlines. I loved teaching and I was determined to build a business around it. Although all good businesses, it's kind of an idea, and over 16 years, it morphs and it changes. And that's what's so vital in every business is that willingness, first off, and then the ability to pivot.
And so what sort of pivots did you have to make along the way? Because I'm sure, as you said, you didn't just come out and be cool, we've produced all these FAA guidelines, we're perfect now, let's just roll it out and have to sell it.
Well, go back to the very beginning. Originally thought I was going to start a flight school, and I'm listening to all the classics, Jim Rohn and Zig Ziglar and all these, Tony Robbins, all this stuff. They're saying you have to get leverage in your business. I'm thinking, leverage in my business? That means more airplanes, more insurance, more fuel, more instructors, more liability. And I'm an 18-year-old kid going, no bank's going to give me money for all this stuff. Venture capital was a foreign idea to me at that time. What am I going to do? And about this time, I grew up in Florida. And when you live in Florida, you go to the beach kind of each weekend. And I had a lot of friends who surfed. And I would be hanging out with them and watching them. And a lot of the surfers had these things that were called a GoPro camera. And I'm I've never seen one of these GoPro cameras before. This is fascinating. And they're yeah, they're waterproof and look, I can smash it and all this stuff. I'm thinking, I can put this on the airplane. So I took all the money I had, basically. I bought 2 Hero Ones from GoPro. I put them on the airplane and I filmed a flight lesson like Kim was there with me. In fact, I even left the left seat, the pilot seat, empty. And I talked to you like you were there. Hey, Kim, we're going to turn left here and you want to do this bank and manage your speed. And I just talked out loud exactly like you were doing a lesson with me. And I filmed the entire thing. And I began to release that on this, again, talk about serendipitous timing. This little thing called YouTube was starting up. And it wasn't like in the garage, but it wasn't owned by Google just yet. It was really starting to get popular though. And I uploaded these videos to YouTube. And then that's when the crazy idea hit me and said, I'm going to teach people to fly on the internet. And like, it even seems like far-fetched to say today, even in a post-COVID world where we learn everything online. But imagine 16 years ago, some 18, 19-year-old kids saying, I'm going to teach people to fly on the internet. Like, you talk about some pioneers get arrows and everything else. Like, it was a very far-fetched idea at the time.
And what level of like confidence and certainty did you have in yourself? Because not only are you just going, there's 2 parts there. It's like, yes, I'm going to start an online business and I'm going to start teaching people. But at 18, 19, you're going to teach people to fly. Like that's, like, I'm sure like some people at the beginning would have been like, has this guy ever flown before? Like I'm thinking I'm going to get taught by like a Spitjet fighter pilot or something. And then I've got like young Jason at 19 years old teaching me. Like how did you overcome that?
It was difficult, actually. It was difficult even to find students in person because I looked so young at the time. I think this kid's not even old enough to be a pilot, just like you said. But one thing that I stumbled into on accident was this idea of positioning yourself as the expert. Because I was so young, I had to kind of take what I could get student-wise. So unfortunately, this is going to sound bad. I got the students that nobody else wanted originally. The person who has 60 hours and can't land the airplane. The person who can't figure this out. Like I kind of got like the
tough cases.
the tough cases. That's a nice way to put it. Thank you for the words. It's the right way to put it. I got the tough cases. But it made me a better instructor. And I began to build a reputation of, hey, if you need help with your landings, go to this guy. By the way, he does these videos. And I just niched within a niche. And then once people saw we knew what we were talking about, exactly what you're getting at, we were able to position ourselves as the authority and the expert. Kim, I'm no smarter than any other flight instructor. I'm no better. I was just the one who was willing to put himself out there. And I guarantee there's listeners right now who are thinking like, there's already so many financial planners on YouTube. There's already so many chefs on TikTok. Like, why just be one more? No. Put yourself out there. Right? Put one foot in front of the other and just give it a try. And your first video is going to get 12 views and you're going to wonder why you're even doing this. Just like your first podcast probably got 12 listens. You're like, okay, am I onto something here? What's happening? Right? But it's the next episode gets 24, the next one, and it becomes exponential after that. You've got to be willing to put yourself out there and accept the criticism along the way too.
100%. And that's why I think it's like, when you go into something so young, I think it's probably an extra added benefit because you haven't been jaded by the world yet of like the world of rejection and all the fear of failure because you're going for it. And I think especially what you said there, though, going for those harder cases, because a lot of times, and it was similar to when we started our businesses, like I would get people come to me who's like, we do marketing and ads, whose ad accounts were on death row. They were like, I have to make this work this week. Otherwise, like, I've got no money left. And it was like, they were tough, but because they were such tough cases, because again, I started very young, not much experience. You have to be able to kind of show your mettle and show that you know what you're talking about. So, I think that's an extra piece there as well, being when you can deal with people that are the more difficult, the tough cases and coming through.
Sure.
When you get a normal client come through, it's a breeze, right? You're like, this is easy. What? You can actually land the plane? Oh, okay, cool.
You're exactly right. So sometimes being a little bit naive can be of a benefit, right?
And so from there, obviously you started getting traction on YouTube. What were some of the next steps from there to starting to grow and expand?
Man, it was a willingness to innovate. And like I was saying earlier, adapt. First off, I got some of the best advice I could have ever gotten. And I want to share it this evening with you too. As you can imagine, learning to fly is extensive courseware wise. I mean, it's 20 hours of classroom work, and that's just the bare minimum. So really it's around 30 or 40 hours of video content I had to create, plus quizzes, plus it's not like you just wake up tomorrow and say, I'm going to make that's one course. I'm going to make a whole aviation curriculum. Like we've been doing it forever. It takes years to make even one course. And I was wondering how to accomplish this thing, how to get all this stuff in my brain out on video and YouTube and behind a paywall eventually. And a very wise friend of mine came to me and said, Jason, you don't have to get it right. You just have to get it going. And without that advice, honestly, I'm a bit of a perfectionist sometimes. I would have never started. So I just made the first 8 lessons and then I launched the thing. Realistically, the course ended up being about 18 lessons and I just had 8. And I'm going, okay, I've got an 8 lesson head start now. And I've got customers coming in. I better hustle now. And it gives me the incentive and the fire and the fuel to get this done. Because guess what? Just as you were early on in your business, I was scripting the videos. I was the talent on the videos. I had to figure out how to edit videos, distribute the videos. Back then was not as easy as it is today, especially behind a paywall. I built the website. I hacked WordPress to get to do what I needed to do. Like you're the person who wears all the hats. And sometimes you have to reignite that fire to keep that going from that perspective. But it's not an overnight success. 1 member became 2 members, became 4 members. And it's frustrating to me that everybody wants to kind of look on Instagram and TikTok and see this beautiful thing that's happening on stage when you and I know the truth that behind the scenes is like absolutely chaos. And even here today in both of our businesses, I'm sure there's some chaos behind the scenes that we're always just managing, negotiating. That's really what business is often. So it wasn't all like, sunshine and rainbows the entire way. We had a lot of difficulties along the way and a lot of those pivots like we were talking about.
So true. I remember someone the other day, they said, the other week, they were like, I thought about, quitting my business and going back and getting a job because it's less stress. Oh. And I was like, look, that probably happens to me 4 times a day. But then I remember all the freedoms that I have in my business and what it gives me and what it affords me and all that sort of stuff. So I was like, it's never smooth sailing. And I just said, you just get better at dealing with problems and the problems just get bigger. Mm-hmm. From dealing with 2 students and say someone's upset about something to dealing with 220 people are like, it just gets magnitude bigger over time.
You're exactly right. And the hardest part of all that was scaling and knowing how to scale appropriately, because for 16 years, we ran it all the way up to the exit. We ran it like a mom and pop business. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, sometimes I wish I had some greater management abilities to help scale a little bit smarter, a little bit better. When do I have enough support tickets to hire another support agent? When do I have enough videos in the queue to hire the next video editor? Like these were the decisions I was just making based on a gut. Like I'm a 3-time college dropout. I don't have the fancy MBA from an Ivy League school or anything like that. Like a lot of people just out there trying to figure business out. And you got to get in there, get your hands dirty and iterate quickly. You're going to make mistakes. You got to learn from them and move on to the next thing.
100%. Because as you say, it's some businesses, and this is going to sound weird to some people to hear, but they can scale themselves to bankruptcy. It's like, totally. I'm doing the right thing. I'm doing this, or I'm hiring these people. But as you say, you've got videos in the queue and you bring on a new editor, but then the next week there's no capacity for them or something like that. And now you're paying for someone that you've got on the books that maybe shouldn't be there. So it's a very difficult thing. As you say, even with support, even with a good team around you, it can sometimes be tricky. So as you were growing, and did you know that your end goal was to exit, or was that just like a happy coincidence at the end, or like what were you building towards?
Well, of course, everyone in their mind is building towards some sort of exit. Was I prepared for that exit? The answer was absolutely not. And actually, we lost the first deal. Private equity came to us, and back to that idea of I was running it like a mom and pop business, and that private equity came in. I'm getting all excited. My wife and I are thinking where we're going to go to celebrate. We're already seeing the money in the bank account in our minds. Like we've got this all figured out. We get into due diligence. And I'm sure no one from the IRS, that's our tax friends over here in the States, is listening to this. But like most business owners, you'd go to the grocery store and you'd use the business credit card and you'd categorize it in QuickBooks as office expenses. And we unfortunately use that business a lot I don't want to say like a piggy bank, but there was personal expenses in the business. And we stayed at the Ritz-Carlton when we could have stayed at the Holiday Inn going to a trade show or just things like that. And I remember the private equity company came to us and said, "Hey, Jason, it's clear you have a great business here. However, when we look at the financials, we can't make heads or tails of it. Like, you've got all these ad backs, all these expenses. You went to the grocery store here. It's categorized as this. Like, this is a big old mess. It's a spider web. We're walking away." And I was heartbroken, right? Because we had 36 people, healthy, 7 figures in revenue. And I was the bookkeeper, by the way. I'm the CFO and still run this thing as a mom and pop business. But it was such a wake up call for me to say, "Hey, listen, let's go on." We actually went on Upwork and found a fractional CFO and a full-time bookkeeper and cleaned up the books and got rid of the personal expenses and started running it like a big boy business, like we should have been the entire time. 9 months later, we were not seeking it out. Private equity came to us again. And that is a deal that closed at a higher multiple, thus a higher value. And I don't want to say, better people. The other people were great as well, but just a really great fit for where the business is going now. So it all worked out. And I know you've read the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And one thing he says in there that we really live by is, in every adversity, there's the seed of a greater advantage. I could have been like, "Oh, we lost the deal. The world is ending. This is totally terrible." Instead, we said, "Okay, it hurt, but what can I learn from it? And what can I implement about that? Let's bring in the fractional CFO. I don't need a full-time CFO. Just give me someone, a quarter of the month, a full-time bookkeeper." And we cleaned up our books. And again, private equity is so hungry. They're seeking people out. So you need to make sure, business owners listen to this, that you have your ducks in a row and you're ready for when that opportunity comes, so you can truly seize it and not miss it like I did the first time.
Yeah, 100%. I forget whose quote it is. It might have been a Les Brown or something like that, but it was like, it's better to be prepared for an opportunity and not have one than have an opportunity and not be prepared. And I think that's it on so many cases where everyone's like, "Oh, next month I'll tidy that up. Like, next month I'll work on that, or next quarter I'll do that, or next financial year I'll take care of that." Like, rather than having it all sorted. Because as you say, if someone comes, and that is for most businesses, really, whether or not you sell it, if you build it to sell, you've got everything working in the right places and you've got the right pieces of the puzzle. So it should be something that everyone does 100%. And then when you were getting close to that stage, was it the similar level of excitement as before? Were you like, "Okay, what are we going to do? What are we going to celebrate?" And did you have the question that kind of pops into my mind, which is like, what next? Like, if we do this and I'm like an entrepreneur and I'm working hard and all these things, and it's like on Monday after the celebration, maybe a bit of a holiday, like, what do I do with myself?
You're exactly right. It was a wave of emotions. So on the day of the sale, my wife and I were just refreshing our bank account over and over, waiting for the wire to hit. We did it so much, we locked ourselves out of our accounts, and then we're like freaking out, calling them to get back in. And by the time we got back in, the money had cleared. And of course, you're happy, you're excited. All of this is great. But then the next day comes and you go, "Wow, I've done this for the past 16 years, right?" Like, it went from jubilation to kind of sad, actually, after a little bit of it. Because then you're thinking, like, what do I do next? I have a non-compete that says stay away from airplanes and everything else. And it was really my wife who helped kind of bring everything together. And she said, "Jason, you are a great teacher. You've done a great job teaching aviation. But one thing you've taught me," this is her speaking, "and our children, is how to steward our finances well." And through all of this, I've always been very big into the market and to trading and to just saving and budgeting and everything else. She goes, "You need to take your fancy Google sheet and algorithms and everything else. Let's build this into something. Let's go make a bank. Let's go make an app. Let's go do this to bring this out to the public." And by the way, now, the last business we bootstrapped with nothing. I was living with my parents. This one, we've got some firepower behind us now from the sale. And let's take everything we learned over those past 16 years and prove that business is business, right? Yes, you built an aviation business, but when you know the fundamentals of business, like you talked about in your last episode, a few episodes ago with Michael Gerber, like when you know the foundation, you can apply that to any niche. Obviously, you have to approach it with the passion and the knowledge and the expertise. But business is business. It's a sport at the end of the day. I don't play sports. Business is my sport. That's how I look at it,
Yeah. And then, so going into this new business, 16 years of learning, like what have you done differently than obviously, the previous time?
We went from 16 years doing that business, probably 2 years of even trying to get that business going till we got Moolah launched in 9 months. And I'm talking, you would think FAA approvals are hard. Imagine SEC and FDIC and every federal banking agency you can imagine that we had to seek approvals from. Like we were really being sharpened in our aviation business to do this, dealing with regulators, dealing with proprietary, software code and algorithms and everything else. We built our own learning management system in the last business. So very tech savvy from that standpoint. And it was just preparing us for this moment. And I think that's true of all things in life. Everything's just preparing you for that next big moment and how you're going to deal with that. But you're exactly right. We were able to really exponentially not only build, but grow and scale Moolah and do it so much leaner as well. And it's not because of the buzzwords like AI and everything else. All that helps. But honestly, like we learned so much. Like I grew our last business up to 36 employees and then scaled it down to 12 and made more money, top line revenue. And of course, bottom line revenue as well. Like when you learn these laws of scaling and maximizing productivity, it really became exponential for the company. And we're applying that to the next business now.
I love that. And so for anyone that's listening and maybe like they've got a good business, it's working at the moment, but they are looking at that next step of like growth scale, whether it's more people, more clients, whatever it might be for them. What's like one word of it or like a couple words of advice that you would give to them to keep in the back of their mind as they're looking to do that?
It all comes down to leverage, which has clearly been a buzzword that we've been talking about a lot. In our aviation business and Moolah for that matter, because they're very similar business models, believe it or not, which is give away some of your best content, knowing people are going to come back for signing up for your bank, your investing app, or signing up for your flight training app and everything else. It's a give first mentality. So we're very heavy in production. With Moolah, we produce at least 2 pieces of content every single day across 4 major platforms. I mean, it is a content machine, and as was our past business. So I looked at that and said, where can I create the greatest leverage? Back then, it was someone to shoot and edit the videos. I was the on-camera talent and the subject matter expert. I wasn't an expert at back then. It was like Final Cut Pro and stuff. That's kind of obsolete now, but that was the thing back then. I need to hire somebody that could do that. So you have to look at your business and say, where are my key revenue drivers and how can I create the greatest leverage in those? That's what this really comes down to.
I like that. And Jason, I could probably speak to you and pick your brains on this business stuff, growth stuff all day because it's so exciting to chat to you about. But I would like to ask one question as we get towards the end of our time here together, which is there a question that I haven't asked you yet that I should have?
Wow. Yeah, there's been really something on my heart lately. And I don't know how to really frame it as a question. Maybe the question would be like, hey, leave us with one little bit of wisdom you've been pondering lately. And it's the idea from, I'm going back through all the classic business books that I read 16 years ago to get myself back in that startup mindset again. And one of those is Good to Great. I mean, still classic. Yes, I realize a lot of the companies mentioned in there aren't great anymore, but they had the principles behind it. So disregard that aspect of the book. But one thing Jim Collins talks about in Good to Great is the 20-mile march. And what he explains is you have 2 teams trying to race across the country, say from east to west. They're trying to race across the country. One team says, hey, I'm going to march 20 miles every single day. Good weather, bad weather, when I'm sick, when it's snowing, when it's too hot, when it's perfect out. Doesn't matter, 20 miles every day. The other team says, hey, when the weather's good, we're going to go 50 miles. When it's cold, well, we'll just stay in that day and sleep in our tent. And when it's raining, we only made it 10 miles, but we'll just do what we can. The team that wins every single time is the one that consistently goes 20 miles every single day. On the good days where they feel like they can go 50, no, slow down a second. Go take a nap. Let's go rest. Don't burn yourself out now. And on the bad days when you go, I don't feel like doing this anymore. This feels like a job. I don't want to do it. You still march your 20 miles no matter what. Over and over. My wife was a professional tennis player on the European tour, and her coach used to always tell her, just hit the ball in one more time. Stop trying to get fancy. Just hit the ball in one more time. That's what business is. It's 20 miles every day, or just hit the ball in one more time, whatever analogy you need. It is just small, consistent efforts. Stop trying to hit home runs and just hit the ball in one more time and live to play another day and let that compound and grow. That's what business really is at the end of the day. Just keep it on.
I love that. So true. And I also it's Tuesday here in Australia. I play tennis every Monday night. And every time you say that, it's like every time you get the ball and you're like, I'm going to hit a winner, or I'm going to smack it back into the net or
right in the net,
out of bounds. And you're like, if I just a normal shot over the net in, and the point keeps going.
Exactly.
Yeah. So true. I love it. And then Jason, for people listening, if they want to find out more about what you're up to, keep in touch with what's happening, where's the best place for them to connect with you online?
So across all social media, find us. It's a Moolah Copilot. So TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Moolah Copilot. You'll get to see some of those strategies I'm talking about. We give away a lot of great content on investing, saving, budgeting. Oh, and by the way, you can do that better inside the Moolah app. Like, that is the marketing strategy. Obviously, there's a very aggressive paid strategy, which you would appreciate in there as well, Kim, to see and promoting that content. But you'll notice one thing too, every piece of content has a call to action. So that's not a call to action to go download Moolah. It's a call to action. Just check it out from a marketing standpoint. I'm always open to feedback too. So please DM me if you think of things we can do better, because I love iron sharpens iron, right? We can collaborate on that, then we can get better and better. So I appreciate that as well from everybody.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So guys, check that out. Share this story around with anyone that's maybe they're growing, they're trying to grow, they're looking at different ways and how they can grow their business. Get Jason's message into their ears. And again, Jason, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate you making the time.
Appreciate you, Kim. Thanks.
Cheers.